All right, good afternoon, everyone. All right, good. It's a good house in here. Okay. I just wanted to share with this room, and Eileen, I hope it's okay to share. Someone shared with me that there are 220,000 people on our live stream. So hello to everyone on the live stream. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is my honor and my privilege to be able to introduce our next panel, Senator Gillibrand and Molly Ball. They are both incredible women change makers, and with gender equity as a core value of us at the foundation, it is such an honor to have you both here. Senator Gillibrand is a born and bred New Yorker. Thank you so much for representing all of us, our country. Your values are so deeply aligned with the work of the foundation. And I think the thing that we were talking about just earlier was the Inflation Reduction Act. Senator Gillibrand was a huge champion and driver for that, for New York State, for our country. And as a foundation, I think we're very, very focused on making opportunity universal and sustainable. And this is one huge step in doing that. And we're very pleased to help support that for communities across the U.S. Molly, I had a chance to read a little bit of your book, and I think for those of you who don't know Molly, she is an incredible author. She is also, her day job is Times national political correspondent, and I guess maybe your side hustle is to be an author. And she just wrote and published the most incredible book called Pelosi. For those of you who haven't checked it out, it's about Nancy Pelosi, our first women Speaker of the House. And so I just think that this is a really incredible panel, and we're honored, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with you. Over to you, Molly.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Senator. So I think the best kept secret in Washington right now is there's actually quite a lot of bipartisan activity, especially in the Senate. And you have been working on, and in fact succeeded in passing, several bipartisan bills relating to workplace reforms in the last Congress. Can you tell us about those bills and how you go about building bipartisan coalitions in the current climate?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for all your great work. And it's a pleasure to be part of this unbelievable day of speakers and ideas. So when I got to Congress, I represented a 2-to-1 Republican district. It was really red in upstate New York, and I was the first Democrat to represent it in over, 40 years. It was a long time. And so I knew instinctively that the only way to get things done is to find common ground, to listen to people and bring people together around shared values. And so I've always used that in the Senate, and I've been able to pass major legislation because of it. My early wins were repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, passing the 9/11 health bill. And one issue kept coming across my desk, which was sexual assault and sexual violence in the workplace, especially in the military. And so I heard story after story from service members about what it was like to serve and to be abused, harassed, or assaulted, and then disbelieved, and then because they reported, retaliated against. So I got to work, and I started working with very conservative senators. One of my first supporters was Chuck Grassley, then Ted Cruz, then more recently Josh Hawley, most recently Joni Ernst. And when you get that group of people together to talk about how to fix something, you really are spanning the entire ideologic spectrum. And so, especially with Joni as the only female Republican, former commander, and sexual assault survivor, she had a lot of authority on this issue. And so we were able to bring many more Republicans to the debate. And over time, it took us about 12 years to get this bill done. We just passed it last year. It took many iterations. But now the military must create a new chain of command for this type of effort. Instead of a commander in the chain of command of the victim or survivor or both, it has to be someone outside the chain of command, a trained military prosecutor who will make these decisions about whether to go forward. It will revolutionize everything within the military for a much more transparent and accountable system. But during that long fight, I had opponents. One of my opponents was Lindsey Graham, and he fought me every step of the way. He just didn't want to do this change. But about 5 years ago, Gretchen Carlson from Fox News went to him and said, Lindsey, I need to tell you what the workplace is like for me at Fox News. Not only have I been assaulted and harassed, But I've been silenced, and it's because I had to sign a mandatory non-disclosure agreement and a mandatory arbitration agreement. And I didn't get the kind of justice that I would have been able to get if I could have sued in a court of law and named my harasser. And Lindsay said, okay, well, I'll work on this. And she said, well, you have to work with Kirsten. She's the lead on the Democratic side. And he's like, okay, I can't do the military thing, but I can do this with her. And so Lindsay and I teamed up, and just last year we got our bill voted on, and it passed unanimously. It changed 60 million employment contracts overnight. So sometimes you just have to keep working at an issue over and over again with different people till you get that consensus reached. And so Lindsay and I found our thing. And so I said to him, because this is the biggest workplace reform in decades, without a doubt. I said to him, Lindsay, people are discriminated against in the workplace for all sorts of things, for gender, for LGBTQ, for disability, for race, for age, for gender. Why don't we fix all of the workplace and make sure no one has to do mandatory arbitration agreements or mandatory non-disclosures? And he just said, no, I can't do all that. He said, but I'm happy to work with you on the old people. So I said, okay. So our next effort is going to be age discrimination, which is very important. And now that I'm 56, I'm in that category. Once you hit your mid-50s, you are often pushed out because of your age, because it's cheaper for a company to hire someone who's just out of school, someone with less experience. And so it's very common for older workers to be pushed out of their jobs, and it's a real chronic problem. So I'm excited about that next effort.
Are there other opportunities that you see for further bipartisan collaboration this Congress?
Oh, absolutely. So last Congress, we had so much bipartisan success that I think it really inspired Republican colleagues as well as Democratic colleagues to really enjoy working together and feel like they were making a difference. So we passed the very significant bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars across this country rebuilding roads and sewers and bridges and high-speed rail and mass transit, electric grids, all the things that we have needed to do over many decades we are doing. And that's huge. We passed a semiconductor bill for advanced manufacturing in the United States that will do not only semiconductors, but AI and supercomputing and quantum, all industries where we want to be at the forefront so that we can set the standard and be nationally secure. We passed a bipartisan gun reform bill and mental health bill that had at the core of it my gun trafficking bill to ban gun trafficking, make it a federal crime. We've already, in New York, prosecuted 6 traffickers, confiscated 200 weapons. That's going to be magnified by the hundreds and thousands all across the country. So it's a way to address public safety. And as any parent or grandparent knows, COVID did not go well for our young kids and for our children. And so when you have seen a rise in crime in New York, it's among youth. It's among recidivists. It's not a rise in serious crime. But a lot of those are COVID hangover effects. And so getting billions of dollars for mental health, also widely bipartisan, is something that's going to make a huge difference in addressing some of our most entrenched public safety issues, including homelessness. And so those are the things we did. And so in this new Congress, there's a lot of momentum to keep going. And so I'm working with Republicans on a paid leave bill. I'm working with Republicans on Katie Britt, the new senator from Alabama, on affordable daycare. There's 8 senators working on immigration reform. There's a lot of interest. Senator Schumer has committed to working on an AI bill on a bipartisan basis in this Congress. So there's a lot of urgent issues. And then there's some easy things that we always do on a bipartisan basis that we should also be able to do this year, which is the Farm Bill. We do it every 5 years. It's where we address agricultural policy, but also rural development and food security, 2 issues very important to New York. And the Defense Bill, where we are going to do a lot of work on cyber, on support for our service members and their families, a lot of issues on emerging threats, addressing risks with regard to Russia, Ukraine, and China. And so it's a very important bill. So I think we'll do all those things and hopefully more because there is this momentum in the Senate. Now, the House is different. We have a new speaker, largely untested. He's working very hard right now to figure out how to make sure we don't default on our nation's debts. and President Biden is very dedicated to finding that bipartisan solution. I'm optimistic that they will find their way. If for some reason those negotiations implode, we have the 14th Amendment. I think the administration should use it in the 11th hour if necessary, because it's in the Constitution. And I think even taking it straight up to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible, Trump just appointed 3 originalists, and they will adhere to the original text of the Constitution, which says you may not hold the full faith and credit of the United States hostage. So I think we'd have support, especially from someone like Gorsuch and Roberts, because Gorsuch was a corporate lawyer and Roberts is the chief judge and doesn't want to see the U.S. economy collapse on his watch. So I'm optimistic that even if we can't get us to the bipartisan deal, that this last effort by the White House is definitely worth it, and I would urge the president to do it if McCarthy somehow steps away from the negotiating table.
It's interesting to hear you talk about your work on things like military sexual assault as workplace bills, which they are, right?
Yeah.
But when you talk about something like paid leave, that's something that a lot of businesses worry is going to cost them money. Mm-hmm. How do you talk about that and other of these workplace reforms with the business community, and why do you think they'd be beneficial?
Well, something like paid leave, we have a lot of data on about how much it helps the economy and businesses. California has had a paid leave program in place for over 10 years, and when they've done statewide polling of their businesses, 99% of businesses have said that it had 99% said it improved their retention and improved their morale, and 90% of businesses said it had no negative impact on their bottom line or a positive impact on their bottom line. So there's just very comprehensive support, and it works for workers. We just got through a pandemic. Every family member understands sometimes you need time with your family, whether to care for a loved one who's sick, or to welcome a new child, or to help a dying parent. These are real family challenges that everyone faces, and if you cannot take time off and be paid, you may not be able to take that time off, and you have that gut-wrenching decision about whether to meet your family's need or earn your paycheck to put food on the table. So those are real challenges. I think we can make the case to the business community that paid leave makes sense. From the Republican Party perspective, the perfect paid leave plan for me is universal and mandatory, and it pays for itself if everyone pitches in, like Social Security. They don't want anything universal or mandatory, but they might consider an opt-in type of program where a state can opt in, or a business or an individual, and that we pay for, that we figure out a proper way to pay for it. That would work, and we're working on legislation right now to do that. So we'll see if we can get that through. I think it would be something that small states would really appreciate, because they can't afford to do the economies of scale that the big states have done. And I think a lot of small businesses would love it, because if there's a plan that they can just buy into or opt into, they don't have to create it themselves. Because retaining good employees that you've trained is really, really important. And making sure their workforce is happy and thriving is also important. So I think we can make the case.
As Liz mentioned, you also worked very hard on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is not bipartisan, but and despite the name, it's mostly a climate bill. What do you hope for from those climate provisions, the climate spending in that bill, and what do you think we still need to do on climate?
So the Inflation Reduction Act was the one dem-only bill. It had two main provisions. The first, as you said, was the climate provisions, and I'll describe those in a minute. And the second was lowering the cost of prescription drugs. It allowed us finally to buy in bulk for Medicare. It allowed us to negotiate the 5 most commonly used medications for our seniors, so that they could cap their costs at $2,000 a year, period, for all medications. It also allowed for insulin to be capped at $35 a month. So huge savings for our seniors. For many of us, we believe healthcare is a right and not a privilege, and basic access to medicine is essential. It's absurd that we don't get to negotiate in bulk, but Canada does and other countries do. And it's absurd that even the VA gets to negotiate in bulk, but not Medicare. So its time has come. It's something we're going to keep working towards. On the climate provisions, it's an investment in renewables. It really incentivizes renewable industries to grow and provide energy. It incentivizes businesses to be green. It incentivizes different industries to get rid of toxins that create toxicity in air and water. So just there's a lot of resources to move us away from fossil fuels towards renewables and to attack pollutants that pollute our air and water directly. So there's a lot of money and resources to generate this industry, and it's very, very exciting because it's across industries. So it's not just energy generation and fuel, it's also efficiencies in buildings, efficiencies in appliances, efficiencies in transportation. It incentivizes electric cars. It incentivizes the infrastructure so electric vehicles works. So it's across all industries, which I think is really exciting.
This issue, though, is so polarized. I mean, do you see any openings for bipartisanship on climate?
I do. So the Farm Bill, as we mentioned, is coming up. And in the Farm Bill, there's a number of areas where we may be able to get very pro-climate issues paid for and included. One, for example, is brownfield sites. Every community everywhere in America has brownfield sites. They have toxic water, toxic air. They have generational pollution. So, for example, we know that PFOA, forever chemicals, are generated for two reasons. One, in manufacturing of plastics. Another is in, it was used by the military in firefighting foam, so all our military bases have PFOA. So we can get money in the Farm Bill to clean up toxic air, toxic water, brownfield sites that everyone will support. And that is a huge climate goal. Because when you can clean toxic sites, you can reuse those sites. It allows you to have greater access to clean water for agriculture so we can be more sustainable. There's lots of incentives for sustainability in the Farm Bill for our farmers. We have a conservation program, which is one of the most often used and desired programs for farmers to learn and to have different methods of clean air, clean water, and conservation. But we run out of money every year. Like there's never enough conservation money for the number of people who apply for it. So really funding conservation is a huge opportunity in the Farm Bill. And just create more stewardship, create more incentives to be stronger stewards of our forests, of our grasslands, of our ports and our water infrastructure, and a lot of that can go into the Farm Bill.
You mentioned the gun trafficking legislation that you worked on. We've just had the 1-year anniversary of the tragedy in Uvalde. And that's an issue where I think so many people have sort of lost hope that anything can be done, but there has been a small amount of progress. Do you see any prospects for doing more when it comes to guns?
Oh, yes. So last year, our bipartisan gun trafficking and mental health bill was really seismic in its scope. Places like New York, we have gun death of children almost every day. Stray bullets hit a 4-year-old on a park bench in Brooklyn. A stray bullet hits a teenage girl on her way to graduation, about to go to UPenn. These are stories of families that I've heard in New York that are devastating and gut-wrenching. So to get rid of that kind of gun death, you really needed to deal with trafficking, because in New York, almost all these guns used in crimes come from out of state, and they're almost all illegal. And so stopping that flow of weapons is essential. The Uvalde shooting and many of the other shootings around the country that get the headlines, those are often assault weapons bought sometimes legally without even any red flag. That's hugely problematic. And so the solution in those cases is banning assault weapons and banning large magazines for the entire civilian population. These are weapons of war built for military use only. And it's outrageous that people insist that an 18-year-old can buy a military-style weapon that our service members train on for years. It's an outrage. And so, so we have to keep fighting for that. We have to keep fighting for a full ban. And I think we can keep making the arguments across across party lines, because people are dying everywhere, and they're dying in red places and blue places. And it's just as heartbreaking no matter where it happens. And so that's one argument. The second argument is we still can clean up the background checks and the red flag laws. They're not perfect and they're not complete. And so there's more common ground to build there. And I think there can be momentum on both those issues. I think one thing that a number of states are working on is trying to get rid of the ban on suing gun manufacturers. And so there's a lot of law firms and lawyers, not-for-profit law firms, that are doing this work right now to try to find another way for justice for these victims and their surviving families.
Is it your sense that the politics surrounding this issue have changed? Is that why that bill was able to pass in the wake of Uvalde?
We can actually test.
I think the urgency and the climate has changed,
Okay,
not
great.
necessarily the politics on
Awesome.
guns.
I just want to see your lighting.
The
and
gun
make
trafficking
sure
bill that I
everything's
wrote
okay.
was always bipartisan. In fact, after Sandy Hook, it got 58 votes. We were only 2
Awesome.
votes shy. And
Yeah,
it was
we're
because of a
actually
dispute
muted in the
between a
room.
couple of senators changing like a small piece
Okay,
of the
great.
language. We could have got that
Awesome,
bill
thanks.
done. But there was a reluctance to do just that. They always wanted the other 2 pieces for the last 10 years. And I think we got to a point, well, let's do what we can. And that is the gun trafficking and the mental health money. The mental health violence disruption money is really important. Being able to create after-school programming and summer school programming for communities where kids would be dragged into gangs is really vital. Making sure we can do substance use disorder, violence prevention, so people don't overdose or don't succumb to suicide is really important. That mental health money can be used for postpartum depression. It can be used for any violence disruption effort that any not-for-profit or school or entity wants to invest in the country. So that's a hugely important thing. So I think we got to the point where we decided we must do what we can, and the things that we just did is going to save lives. So never letting the perfect be the enemy of the good is a really important thing to remember.
If you're in the audience and you have a question for Senator Gillibrand, please start thinking about that now. I will take your questions in just a couple of minutes. But first, I can't resist asking you a political question. You're on the ballot next year. There will be a presidential election, I hear, as well. Do you support the president running for re-election? How do you like his chances?
I do support President Biden, and I think he's our best chance of winning 4 more years. He has a hugely powerful record to run on. Passing all of these bipartisan pieces of legislation, investing in families, helping the economy grow are so important. And he's done important things like getting the cost of prescription drug prices down and investing in alternative energy and doing all the important things for infrastructure and advanced manufacturing. Those are things people want to hear about. And so I think he's our best candidate because he's gotten things done. He wants to finish the job. We can help him, and we can help him continue to deliver for America. So I'm all in. I think he's great.
Who's got a question for Senator Gillibrand? Raise your hand and a microphone will come to you. And if you don't have a question, I will just keep asking them. All right.
Raj has one.
Raj has one.
Senator, thank you for being here. Raj Shah with the Rockefeller Foundation. Could you share, we had a conversation ahead of time where we talked a little bit about food as medicine, and the foundation has made significant investments around the country to promote medically tailored meals and produce prescriptions. What are the pathways that you'd recommend, and for everyone to hear, where this can become a much bigger part of how the American food system operates, and even someday how Medicare and private insurers reimburse for medical interventions?
Mm-hmm. So one opportunity to invest in that now is the Farm Bill. One part of the Farm Bill is nutrition security. So making sure people have the food they need. And we have a very important program called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And SNAP is life-saving. It's not everything. It's literally about $2 a meal, $6 a day. It is not a lot of money, but it can be the difference of a family having fruits and vegetables in a given week, or lean proteins, or dairy products. It really is the life and death difference for nutrition for so many older Americans, for veterans, for children, for low-income families, for people with disabilities. And so one idea is use this opportunity of reauthorizing SNAP to try to make this benefit be more substantial. more resources, and maybe specific resources. Maybe the increase in SNAP can be specifically for medically tailored meals, for the ability of, for example, for older people or veterans to use their SNAP benefits for congregate meals that can be made and be medically tailored. They can be nutritious. A lot of our older Americans, a lot of our veterans have a tough time cooking for themselves. They need a hot meal delivered. That institutions and organizations like In God's Love We Deliver here in New York, that they could actually do medically tailored meals delivered directly to older Americans or veterans to their doors. There's so many opportunities for wellness and for health and nutrition in this part of the Farm Bill. I think we should be creative with our Republican counterparts on what type of program would you be willing to fund. And the thing about medically tailored meals is it's provable. It shows that when you give people the food that helps nourish their body and heal their bodies, the healthcare costs go down. So the VA alone, when they have access to medically tailored meals, the prices and the costs of healthcare go down 15, 16, 17%. It's a huge cost savings, which you can monetize and say this is worth hundreds of millions of dollars every year. So it pays for itself. And so I'm going to try to make the case in this year's Farm Bill that medically tailored meals, congregate meals, allowing not-for-profits who can prepare and deliver meals, that they can be part of the solution in being able to deliver SNAP benefits. A lot of people are eligible for SNAP that don't ever even apply. And so imagine if the VA could apply for you. Imagine if a not-for-profit could apply for you and then deliver the meals to your doors. That would be huge. So I'm working on ways to augment food as medicine in the Farm Bill with some of these ideas.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Over here.
Okay, my Rockefeller friends, please don't laugh, but Trooper Sanders from Benefits Data Trust. We actually help New Yorkers apply and get screened for SNAP with the Rockefeller Foundation's help. So around that, there's about $9 to $10 billion worth of SNAP that people are eligible for that they don't claim. We have a big issue around stigma. It's complicated for states to administer these programs. What are your thoughts on how we can really remove the sludge from these programs so that if we get the policies you talk about, it's easy for people to get it? Thank you.
So specifically for the 9 to 10 billion of unclaimed SNAP funds, I would really try to get legislation written that allows not-for-profits to apply on their behalf, who will serve them the meals. That would be enormous for every community kitchen, every food bank, every institution that takes care of older people or veterans. It would be transformative. And if the incentive to allow these programs to expand is that they're offering medically tailored meals, it has the double benefit of saving money for Medicaid and Medicare. So it pays for itself. And so that's why this is such a win-win issue. When people want to denigrate SNAP recipients, they will always denigrate them by, they're just buying potato chips and soda. Well, that's not true, number one. And number two, let's do a deal then and say any addition to the SNAP program is going to be for medically tailored meals and highly nutritious meals. So it's a way to say, I think you're wrong, but if you want to have a new collaboration to increase SNAP, because they just want to cut SNAP, this would be, we will allow for this with medically tailored meals. And I think it's a win-win. And it's the future of nutrition anyway. So especially for our older adults and our veterans who often need someone to prepare those meals for them.
Well, as you mentioned, there has been a move to try to further restrict SNAP in these debt ceiling negotiations that are going on right now. Do you think that if there are SNAP restrictions in a deal that gets made, that could get through the Senate?
It depends what the restrictions are, and it depends if we can backfill. So, for example, there's lots of ways to help people. So if there's one program that is part of this deal that's something that would be really cutting something beneficial to a group of people, maybe there's another way to restore the help that's given in a different way. I just don't want to rule anything out until we know what the deal is. And so, but I have good faith in President Biden to find that common ground and to negotiate that deal where it is. But my job is to make sure the people who need help are getting help. And if they are denied any help through this deal, I will be working overtime to get that help restored in whatever form it needs to be.
Anybody else got a question right here?
Hi, Senator Charlie Dent. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Hey, quick question on the SNAP program. I should have done this when I was in Congress, but trying to, with the WIC program, Women's Infants and Children, there was restrictions on what people could buy. They had to buy nutritious foods, but less so with SNAP. You kind of just alluded to that. Would it make any sense at all to apply that same WIC standard to SNAP, more nutritious foods? I remember getting in trouble. Susan Collins and I tried to allow potatoes to be included in the WIC program, and I was accused of being a tool for Big Potato, which I thought they were nutritious
Potatoes
foods.
have potassium even more than bananas, so
Yeah.
that person was uninformed.
I said, I can take I will not.
Potatoes are delicious, and they fill up young children who need energy to run around.
It was apparently a human rights violation to suggest this, but I would not tolerate the bashing of the potato. Mashing, however, is okay. But that said, but to at least make SNAP maybe look a little bit more like WIC in terms of the types of foods that can be purchased. Is that something that you guys have thought about?
I don't think so. And it's largely because we want people to have the dignity of going grocery shopping in the way they want to go grocery shopping. And you could put whatever requirements on it that you want, but do you want to be the mom that's with their kid and she buys 1 pint of ice cream for the birthday party and the lady at the cash register says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, you need to bring that back"? Like, why would you do that to someone who's just, it's inhumane, it's unkind, and it's mean-spirited. And yes, it could be done, but I wouldn't want to do it. And yes, I want people to eat nutritious foods, but I have had children too, and they want some Oreos. They want, yes, you'll feed them the chicken and the vegetables and the potatoes and the sliced apples, but they also want Oreos once a week to put in their lunch. They don't want to be the kid that only gets an apple. And what they don't realize is that apple is so good for them, and their mother only wants them to eat the apple. But that's not the nature of children. So I just would suggest that it's just mean-spirited. And yes, we want everyone to be nutritious and healthy. And so maybe this idea of medically tailored meals is a way to give people what they really need as a benefit that's extra, that's on top, especially for seniors, especially for veterans and people who we've seen the health outcomes change exponentially better. But that's the reason why people don't like to be so prescriptive.
Well, I'm from Idaho, so totally in the tank for Big Potato here.
Potatoes are good.
Yeah, and a lot of things would get really zeroed out. So, if we really want to be serious about nutrition and we want to say you can't have anything unnutritious, well, there's things that are almost all sugar that you would never say a family couldn't have, like ketchup. What are you going to put on that burger? You need that ketchup. But that's almost all sugar. So, again, if you start doing these standards, another thing that has a lot of sugar, almost every cereal produced under the sun. And so if you can only buy oatmeal and no other cereal, I don't know, your kid's going to be pretty pissed. It's just a lot of our food that's sold normally isn't very nutritious. It might have some good things in it. It might have, vitamins and minerals added to it. It might have some whole grains in it. But if sugar contents is our cutoff, you're going to be surprised what you eat that you think is good for you that has a lot of sugar. I'm an expert on food, so I can tell you I know all the things. So that's why we avoid it. I understand your instinct, but we just try to be kind to people who need help.
We've got time for one more question. I saw one right here. Yep, this gentleman.
Hi, I'm Joe Pearson. I'm the chair of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, not the Rockefeller Foundation. And I'm also in support of potatoes. My question is, with at least 2 very important elections coming up, are you concerned about gerrymandering and many of the other challenges to free and fair elections?
If I can piggyback on that, what's your general level of alarm about democracy right now?
I'm deeply alarmed, and we are trying to do some things to protect our democracy. So January 6th was a severe wake-up call for most Americans to see that Americans were willing to attack our own Capitol, attack our own lawmakers, burn a vice president's effigy. I mean, things like that is really beyond what anyone would expect in our American democracy. So it is a wake-up call. And we've seen an assault on people's civil rights and civil liberties incessantly for the past decade. We saw it in certainly voting right reforms in so many different red states where they make it harder for people to vote, harder for older people to vote who might not have a driver's license, harder for students to vote because they are not in their state of their birth and they might not have a new driver's license. Assault on people who can't stand in line for 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours in states like Ohio. So we've seen real strategic efforts to deny Black and brown people, older people, people with disabilities, that fundamental right to vote. We've also seen assaults on civil liberties and civil rights. The fact that Trump put in 3 ultra right-wing justices, the fact that McConnell denied a hearing for Merrick Garland, the fact that Roe has been overturned and women no longer have a right to privacy for their entire childbearing years. That is shocking when you say it like that, because for any man in the room, how would you feel to not have the right to privacy from the time you are 12 to the time you are 55? Like, that's the truth. And that means right to privacy in the mail, right to privacy in your phone calls, right to privacy on your Facebook page and on your internet presence, right to privacy in conversations with your doctor, right to privacy in your conversations with your spouse, all of it, zip. And in red states, they are trying to enforce that. That's why they prosecuted a mother and her daughter for talking to each other on Facebook about reproductive care. It's why they're prosecuting a husband and wife who took their 10-year-old rape survivor across state lines to get an abortion. It's why they are prosecuting people who are receiving medicine in the mail and prosecuting doctors that prescribe it. That is an otherworldly place we are in, and that is a huge assault on basic civil rights and civil liberties. So yes, I am deeply alarmed. So to fix those things, in my opinion, we need to abridge the filibuster. We do not have enough votes yet to abridge the filibuster in the Senate. So we need one more Senate Democrat to abridge the filibuster. When we get that one additional Senate Democrat, my opinion is abridge the filibuster for issues of human rights and civil rights. I would codify Roe. I would codify LGBTQ equality. I would guarantee the Equal Rights Amendment, and I would guarantee voting rights. I would do that first and foremost. I would do that whole suite of votes. And yes, McConnell will try to unwind all those things when he's in charge next, but it is much harder to take away rights after they've been given. And I dare him to take away these rights again. I think the American people will protest, they will vote, they will march, they will respond in outrage, and it will be their undoing to do so. So that is my opinion, but we do need one more senator who believes in this strategy to be able to accomplish it. So not today, but someday.
On that note, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you all.